Okay. You're on air right now, Said. And
Okay, Rana, it's your.
Do you want me to kick it off now?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I am Rana El-Kayoubi. I'm co-founder of Affectiva, which is an MIT spinoff, and I'm TechWedi's co-chair. Welcome to TechWedi's second webinar series. Today we're expecting good afternoon and good evening, everyone. I am Rana El-Kayoubi. I'm co-founder of Affectiva. My echo, which is making it hard to present. Welcome to TechWedi's second webinar series. Today we're expecting good evening, everyone. I am Rana El-Kayoubi. Today we're expecting 4 locations in the Middle East. Please feel free to follow us on Twitter. Our handle is techwedi.org, and our hashtag for this series is TW Webinar Series. Also, you'll get an opportunity to ask some questions towards the end. Please feel free to follow us on Twitter. It is my real pleasure to introduce our speaker today, who I've gotten to know over the past couple of years. Said Arida is the founder and Chief Excitement Officer of Nuvu Studio. It's an innovation studio based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Nuvu is paving the way for a new educational model that combines creativity with design thinking and innovation skills. And their products are currently used by thousands of students around the world. The work of their students has been featured in numerous education and mainstream news outlets such as Wired and NPR, VentureBeat, TechCrunch, as well as the White House Science Fair. I can personally attest to the magic of their program. My daughter attended their summer camp a couple of years ago, and she was only 9, but she managed to build this amazing purse, which she used 3D printers and Arduino boards, and it was just an amazing experience. And my son is attending this year's summer camp, and he's expecting to build drones and robotic pets. So really, really an amazing program. Before starting Nuvu, Said received his PhD in design computation as a presidential fellow at MIT, where his PhD work really set the stage for Nuvu. And before MIT, he earned his Bachelor of Architecture from Damascus University in Syria. It is a real pleasure to have you here with us, Said. Thank you for making time, and take it away.
Thanks, Rana. This is the best introduction ever. And we look forward to having Adam with us in the summer, so keep sending us the kids. So this is, I think I'm just going to read this intro from the sponsor of the webinar called Little Thinking Minds. And this is an award-winning company that creates and publishes engaging educational Arabic content for children under 10 in order to advance the quality of Arabic fluency and literacy globally. They offer a subscription-based online leveled reading program and produce video content and apps that have been proven to improve child's reading outcomes in Arabic. To learn more about LTM, please log onto littlethinkingminds.com. Okay, so I'm going to move to my presentation now, and I'm going to share the screen. There we go. Okay. So the screen is showing. Are you seeing the screen, the presentation full screen now?
It's not full screen.
Okay. So when I scroll through it, it's not. It does it. Do you see it though?
Said, on my end, I can still see it's like in slide view. I can see the notes and everything.
Okay. That was kind of different a little bit yesterday.
What happens if you click play?
Yeah, so this is, I'm putting play now. So this is in play mode.
Oh, that's bizarre.
So you are still seeing the notes?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe close it and open it again.
Okay. I think if it does not work, we'll just go with it as is.
Yes, I agree.
Entire screen. Is this better?
Yes, this is perfect.
Okay, so this is Saeed. I will be talking with you about a school that I started in Cambridge, Massachusetts called Nuvo, the Innovation School. This is a quick background about me. Rana kind of covered a big part of that. But I grew up in Syria. I studied in public high school. And then I ended up defying all the kind of expectations of my parents and studied architecture as opposed to medicine. My three older brothers studied medicine, so I was expected to kind of follow that route because when you, I'm assuming some of you might know about the International Baccalaureate system, when you score higher than a lot of other people, you go to medical school and they start basically filtering you based on that. So I was the artist in the family and I wanted to do something very different. So I studied architecture, not knowing exactly what that field meant at the time. I just knew I kind of knew how to draw things and how to imagine things, and that's what led me into it. After finishing my architecture school in Damascus University, I worked for 2 years and then I landed at MIT, also not knowing exactly what the place was about. And I came to MIT in 2002. The goal of it was obviously to kind of continue studying architecture and become one of those, Zaha Hadid-like practicing architects who are making buildings all over the world. But after spending basically 8 years at MIT between my master's and PhD, kind of the whole story kind of changed, and I became a lot more interested in education and design in general and entrepreneurial activities, and that's what basically led me into starting Nuvu around 5 years ago. So this is the kind of the context in which Nuvu started. You have especially in the K12 system here in the US, the system is actually not so different from other countries, even in Syria. Your whole kind of knowledge is segmented into different subjects like science and chemistry, biology, physics, and math, and English, and foreign language. All of these subjects have an hour or two dedicated to them every day. And basically, you have to take all of these courses over 4 years of high school to earn a high school diploma. And that is basically a requirement to enter college. In this country here, there are obviously a lot of different types of school. You have the private schools, the public schools, and then you have charter schools. But all of them, without any exception, kind of follow this, what we call the industrial model of education that was started in the late 19th century. So basically, for the past 120 years, we've been kind of following exactly the same model. And it's so entrenched in the system that is extremely hard to solve, to crack, basically, and try to do something that kind of deviates from the system. So the interesting thing about what the system does is that when we basically bring students from that traditional environment to an environment like ours at Nuvo that is more open-ended, and basically the teachers and the students are engaged in a problem-solving kind of process in which neither the teacher nor kind of the students know the answer for. So you kind of throw the students into this, and you get some really interesting results early on. The first problem that you have is that the students want to solve the problem as fast as they could, because usually in a traditional environment, when you are given a homework that the teacher knows the answer for, you want to answer it as quickly as you could, because being faster is better. But that is not necessarily the case in an open-ended scenario. So if you are designing even a cup or a spoon or something, sometimes even these things might take you months and months of designing and optimization to get it right. So it's interesting when we bring our students here the first few days and we give them these very complicated problems to solve, they think that they can solve them in an hour. The other problem that we have with the students when they come here is that they don't want you to critique their ideas. The only thing that they want you to give them is technical support, because they think of their ideas as the best ideas ever, and they want to protect those, and they think of them as a very personal thing. So the only thing that they want you to give them is really the technical support piece, and that also makes basically their creative process very limited, because they are only kind of obsessing with their own ideas. So for us, really, one of the big goals here is to kind of teach them how to embrace kind of the messiness of the creative process and how to engage in a thorough and thoughtful process that's going to lead to better results at the end. So how do you, I mean, this is the question that I had to kind of grapple with early on, which is how to start a design-driven education. Because I was in the architecture school, and I really thought that the way that architects are being taught is very special, and I wanted to kind of take that and apply it to other fields. Actually, the initial kind of incarnation of this was to start a college level kind of university in back home in Syria, but that quickly turned to be a little bit complicated on the political front. So I started basically focusing on something here, and that is when this whole idea of starting something on a high school level became really appealing, because you know, on one hand you have MIT and Harvard and Cambridge, and that are considered to be, you know, the most kind of advanced higher education institutions, but then on the other hand you have regular high schools that are still teaching the same way I was taught in Syria. So you know, there was a big gap that I thought it needs to be filled by something that it looks very different. So this is really our big goal in general, is to teach the students how to navigate this process. For a lot of our students who initially come to us, this process can be very disorienting. They don't know how to start, they don't know how to stop, and they don't know how to basically iterate on that process. So what we are trying to do here is to codify this process for them and really guide them every step of the way. And the hope is that, you know, after doing this for a few months, they will be able to do it on their own. And as I mentioned, this whole kind of model that we have at Nuvo is inspired by the architecture studio model. And what's interesting about this model is that it has not been standardized the same way biology and physics has been standardized over the years. So it's still based on an apprenticeship model that was developed 400 years ago, and people are still using it today. So this was kind of a major inspiration for me when I started Nuvu. And in this picture also you can see that what is really happening here is that the students are producing objects and artifacts, and then there is a panel of judges that are critiquing the products that the students are putting out there. So there is always this kind of refinement. This is obviously the final review, so the project ends there, but usually this happens also during the process, and then the students basically take that feedback and synthesize it into something that looks better, and then they show it again and they synthesize that and they make it better again. So the studio culture in general is very engaging because of that. Students are basically working day and night on their projects. And this is really what I wanted to take out of the studio model is this kind of critique culture and the engagement piece that was very powerful. And so this is the first kind of way to map out the design process. So you start with an idea, and you produce the first iteration. Probably this will be just a basic idea on a sketch, and then you get a lot of feedback, you make design decisions based on that, and then you produce the second iteration, and then you keep going like this until you basically get to a point where you feel that the design is satisfying the requirements of the design. And this is more of a zoomed in version on the critique culture that happens in the studio, and how we basically move from one iteration to the next. So the students are producing these iterations, and they are putting them out there for the instructor to critique them. So the instructor and the student basically engage in a conversation around what the students produced, and the role of the students basically here, or their goal, is to basically take that feedback and try to incorporate it into their own way of thinking, basically what we call synthesizing it into their own way of thinking, and making design decisions that will take them into iteration 2. And this process keeps going. So basically they get feedback again, and they synthesize that, and they produce another iteration. And this is what really happens in the critique session. And this is basically also describes how a designer thinks. If I am designing a house, so that the first thing that I could say initially, do I want the house to be a box, or do I want it to be a sphere, or do I want it to be a rectangular thing? And any of these kind of ideas that I am thinking about, they have a lot of consequences. So if I made it a circle, then it will be hard to basically add probably windows or doors on it, and how am I going to position it on the site? If I made it a square, it's going to have also certain consequences in terms of also windows and roofs and all of that. So the interesting part here is that an expert designer would be able to kind of cycle through a lot of these options at any given point, and think about the best way to move forward based on testing the consequences of this. So it's in many ways it's really similar to playing chess, and the more you can really predict the outcome of the design decisions that one is making, then the better the product is going to be at the end. But obviously the process is not always as straightforward as I'm saying. Sometimes you make a decision at a certain juncture in your process, and you go with it for a few days, and then you realize that it's going into a dead end. So basically you have to go back and loop back into a previous design decision that you kind of thought about, and then you start the process from there. And this is basically, this is the spaghetti line that I was showing initially. This is how we codify it for the students. And we are usually very transparent with the students. The thing that, for instance, I did not like about my architecture education is that, you until high school, you were trained in a very traditional environment, and then they throw you in a studio environment, and you have no idea what's going on. You are very disoriented. Someone is giving you a problem to solve, and they are asking you to solve it without giving you any ideas of how to solve it. They expect you just to start doing it, because what happens in the studio environment is that all the learning happens after you start producing. So nobody tells you anything beforehand. So this is what we try to change here. We have a lot of thoughtful conversations with our student about the critique process, and we are very explicit with them about why we do that, and we are very explicit with them about how they should receive that critique and what they do with it. So that way, we are building this conversation with them from the beginning, so it's a little bit less disorienting. And so this is really what we try to avoid in the model that we have, is that we don't want the students basically going in a straight line without embracing the messiness of it. An example like this is basically in a straight line means that the students did not really think about a lot of options when they are making the design decisions. It's they think about one thing and they just go and make it, and then they think about the next and they go and make it, but there is no idea about why they are making those design decisions at that particular point, and if they thought about other ways basically that the design can come together so they can move forward. A key thing for us throughout the process is to document also these decisions that the students are making. So every day we ask the students to basically take some time, around 15 to 30 minutes, and talk about that design decisions that they had to take to basically to move between one iteration to the next. So this is kind of the pedagogy and the kind of the educational model that describes the underpinnings of Nuvo. Now that the question about starting the school was the tricky piece. In this country, the way things are set up, probably the easiest thing to do is to start a charter school, because the funding will be coming basically from the state, and the only thing that you need to worry about is basically getting your charter school approved. But then to do that, you really have to operate within the system. So you still have to do subjects, you still have to do tests and all of that. So when I was starting to kind of think about that, I wanted someone else to work with me on it. And I happened to work on a different project at the time at MIT, which is to redesign our graduation ring. So we have something that's called the beaver rat or grad rat, I think, which is basic declaration. The symbol for MIT is a beaver. It's the engineer of nature. So the idea, this is basically what we have on the ring, and it's very kind of prescriptive. I really thought at the time it did not reflect the kind of the culture of MIT in terms of, you know, computation and design and puzzles and all of that. So I came up with this idea to redesign the graduation ring based on these 4 bands, and each one of them kind of describes something about the student in terms of the school that you got your degree from, the degree, and the year that you got it from. And there are tons of holes on these bands, and you have to put it in a very particular way, basically, that locks into your own configuration. So I am a PhD from the architecture school in 2010. So we will customize the MIT band basically with particular holes, so I can only put them together in that particular configuration. So obviously I have a design background, not a computation background. So what I did at the time is announce a competition at MIT for $1,000 to solve this, and one of the people who solved them was an artificial intelligence PhD student in the aerospace department, and we ended up basically spending a year after that working on this. And you can see on the picture on the left there is this whole maze basically that is describing all the possible solutions in the ring. So the interesting thing about this, what came out of this project is that now I have a co-founder with me that I wanted to kind of start the school with. And also the other important piece is that I really wanted to make the school kind of very interdisciplinary, because I really saw the power of having 2 people from completely 2 different backgrounds basically working on something that is kind of insane and crazy at the same time. So after we decided on basically the educational framework and on some of the principles in terms of being interdisciplinary and all of that, someone introduced us to a private high school in the area here, and what was interesting about that high school is that they were looking for a different kind of experience for their students, and we kind of our kind of framework provided that. So we came up with this interesting model in which the students would leave their school for 3 months at a time. They will come to us, so they are with us from 9 to 3 for 3 months, and then they will go back to their school. So what really enabled us to do is that we can really exist outside the system. So we don't have to teach courses, we don't have to get accreditation, we don't have to do any of that. We are just basically training working with these kids for 3 months at a time, and then they leave, and the school, basically the home school, is doing all the work in terms of the traditional work for them, and we do all the kind of the creative innovation work. So that really what made a lot of this model even possible in this case. So the way we structure our curriculum, we don't have any regular courses at all. The schedule is based on these 2-week studio models. So we call our courses studios kind of because it's inspired by the architecture studio. And then every 2 weeks we have around 4. We divide the students basically into 4 different groups, and we give each group a different problem to solve. And you can see we have session 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the student basically kind of cycle between these. And we leave the last 2 weeks a little bit more open-ended because we wanted to kind of the students to take whatever they learned in the first few sessions and do something really interesting at the end of the semester on their own. So this is kind of the process of the 2-week studio. We give the students the problem brief. Basically, this is what they need to solve, and then we frame this problem to them. For us, framing is really key because when we are giving the students a problem to solve, they actually have no idea about the context of this problem. So, for instance, we've designed a few products for kids who have cerebral palsy in a town in Mexico. And then when we wanted the students to work on the studio, they actually had no idea about what cerebral palsy is, and they had no idea about that town in Mexico and the kids that we are trying to work with. So we spent probably around 3-4 days engaging the students with a conversation around cerebral palsy, which this disease the symptoms of it is it can range from having tremor in your hand into being basically not able to have any motor skills, and you have to be in a wheelchair. So we invited also a lot of local families here who have kids with cerebral palsy to come community there in Mexico. And the goal, obviously, of all of this is to kind of give our students a really good understanding about the problem that we are trying to solve. So this is one side of it. The other side of it is that we want to give the students all the tools that they need to be able to solve this. And a lot of it, basically, in this particular project revolved around, laser cutting and 3D printing and sewing. So we also started teaching these skills to the students. And when we are done with the framing, we basically move into the process. So they have to come up with ideas, and then we have to iterate. So for us, the whole notion of iteration is really key. The first idea is usually not the best idea, but you have to kind of go through a process of iteration to take a seed of an idea into something that looks really amazing at the end. And every 2 weeks, we have a presentation that the students need to make. So we train the students a lot on how to present their ideas, whether in a graphic way, but also how to go on the stage and how to present this idea and make it engaging. So the whole notion of public speaking for us becomes really important. And so this happens every 2 weeks. So for us, rather than basically having one project for the whole semester in which you have just one deadline at the end, we distributed that into a deadline every 2 weeks. So we kind of created this creative rhythm that is very interesting. So you don't feel like you are not doing a lot of work and then everything suddenly happens at the end. This way, basically every 2 weeks you are finishing a project and presenting it, and then you are starting a new project after that. And the way we come up with these ideas for the term is really based on a theme. So in this case, for instance, we came up with this theme around cities, and we wanted to come up with a lot of ideas around that theme. And these are some of the concepts in here. So we did bike shelters, we did urban hacks, we did this musical topography, Boston as an Olympic city, and so we do a lot of different studios around the same theme, and some of these studios would require kind of music background, some of them more around building physical prototypes, some would be video games. So we engage all kind of media of expression when we are designing the studios. So this is the space that we have. And so we are located almost on the MIT campus, and we have around 5,000 square feet of space, and we have around 45 to 50 students that we work with at any given time. So it's an open space, pretty much like a studio space, and the students are moving around and creating a lot of things. We have a lot of traditional tools that you see in any traditional shop. But we also have a lot of CNC machines, whether they are the laser cutters or the CNC machines, the big and the small, and a lot of 3D printers. What these tools basically allowed us to do is to produce, even in the scale that we have with high school students, is the ability to produce something that looks very professional. So you don't really need to send them to outsource this to a different company to be able to produce something that looks really amazing as a prototype. We can do all of these things in-house. So this is why we do a lot of training for our kids on these machines. We want to make sure that they are fluent enough, basically, to create whatever they want to create with these machines. Another big thing that we invested a lot of energy in is this, what we call a studio management system. So because our educational model is very, very different from everything else that's out there, we could not really use any of the existing learning management systems that was already available. Probably you heard about Blackboard, because that's one of the bigger kind of providers for these learning management systems. A lot of these learning solutions, they really lack a lot of features when it comes to studio work that is focused on projects and on visual material and on documentation and all of that. Just the whole spirit of what we wanted to do was very, very different. So we basically started building our own tool, and that has been an effort that is taking a big chunk of our time for the last 3 years. So we've built our own kind of development team here that does that. And the basic concept of it is that we have we've built at the core of it, we've built a blogging platform similar to Tumblr and WordPress, because we found out that when people want to document their work, mostly what they do is build is basically create a blogging platform on these sites. But what we really wanted to do is to take it a step further in terms of giving the people a lot more flexibility in terms of uploading different types of content. So it's very easy to upload unlimited sizes of images and video and all of that, just making it easy basically to upload whatever content users wanted to upload. And on top of that, we added the learning management system, so how to connect the studios with the projects and the users. And then, as I mentioned just briefly now, is that we created a lot of tools basically that make this platform runs a lot better, and I'm going to show you some of these tools that we are creating. So when we started this platform, we found out fairly quickly that if there are any friction points in the process of writing the documentation, that the students are not going to do it. It became just too hard. So one example is really for instance, the cameras. So we've had 5 cameras distributed around the studio, and then the students take whatever one of these cameras and they take pictures, but then they have to take the SD card and put them in the computer and upload and download them and then upload them to the site. And that basically made things a lot harder for them, and a lot of people did not want to do it. So what we ended up doing is get these Wi-Fi cards, and we put them in all the cameras, and we built a functionality into the website that will take all of these pictures that are taken on that specific day and basically stream them onto the website. So the only thing that the students need to do at this point is basically just click on an icon called camera, and then they can see all the pictures that they take in that day, and they select the pictures that they want, and then write a comment on it and hit publish, and that will basically write a blog post for them. So it's very straightforward, it's very intuitive, and that actually made massive difference for how our students basically document their work. We also made it very intuitive in terms of how you set up your the course. A lot of other websites have a back end, or they are mostly designed as a back end because nobody outside of that entity organization basically is supposed to see it. And for us, the difference was major in the sense that whatever the students are producing, we wanted also to share them publicly. So we really had to design it in a way that, you know, the whole notion of back end, front end does not exist, that everything looks really great graphically, and then you do all the work that you want to do on the same interface. So this is one of the courses at MIT basically that was used last year. Also, the way you add content is super intuitive. So you can see in the middle here, there's the camera icon, which, you know, so the students can click on this and they can see the stream of pictures that they take in that day. And obviously they can upload video and very different formats of files. And, you know, this is a big reason why we started this platform initially. We did not want to have our kind of front-facing website and our platform to be two separate things. For us, because, you know, 90 or 95% of what the school produces is projects, we wanted to be able to kind of have a very kind of smooth workflow of how to put these or share a lot of these projects online. So when the students are blogging daily about their work, you know, you can see a huge list of all these posts every day. And then when they are presenting at the end of the 2 weeks, what we ask them to do is to basically create a curated version of that process. And then that is the thing that becomes public to people. So if you click on any of these projects, you can go and see that curated version, but you're not going to be able to see the daily updates that the students are writing. And so for us, it was really key to create kind of that streamlined workflow that goes from running the studio itself into basically sharing the work online in a public way. We've been adding also a lot of interesting tools on top of that. One of them is a module to track the students and eventually basically create a transcript for them, because we have a completely different basically criteria of how to assess the students. So all of the traditional tools did not work. So we had to basically create something also from scratch to be able to work with us in a much better way. Also, what the interesting kind of thing about this platform that's happening now is that a lot of architecture schools are starting to use it. So, you know, what's interesting about this is that, you know, when we developed the platform, we only developed it for us, and now we have, you know, thousands and thousands of people are using it across, you know, the world. And it's not only high schools that are using it. There are also a lot of architecture schools and design schools that are using it, including MIT and Harvard and RISD and other places. And because a lot of these also studio-based kind of schools, they were also using what the bigger kind of institution provided, which is usually a learning solution that works for traditional courses, but there's nothing that works for studio kind of based curricula. So we are finding it that a lot of architecture schools are basically wanting to kind of use it, and so this is why we built this extra module on top of the platform to kind of manage the accreditation. So architecture schools, you know, depending on their kind of success, every 2 to 8 years they have to go through this extensive kind of NAB review, and this is a platform like ours is usually great for that, because the work is already online and all the students and the teachers are already by default putting that work online. So so what we did basically is to try to kind of create a tagging system that is very easy, where the teachers at the end of the course will tag a few things here and there, and then suddenly we generate this different page for the people who are going to review the school and review the students' work and basically accredit the whole school based on that. So this has been kind of pretty successful with a lot of the schools that we are working with. So this is just some of the work that our students are creating these, at Nuvu, just to kind of give you an idea about the creative range that we have. So we do a lot of work that is focused on fashion. It's one of those things that allows you to kind of explore a lot of different prototyping kind of tools. So in this case, we use a lot of laser cutting and 3D printing. You can do a lot of embedded electronics in it. So this has been an area where we're really kind of pushed it to the limits in terms of the different prototyping tools that we are using. We also do a lot of work around social impact and 3D printing. 3D printing is one of those kind of amazing tools that is really democratizing a lot of kind of the manufacturing process now, where a lot of people can have 3D printers at home and can start really thinking about things that they would have not been able to kind of think about before, and be able to create things that they were not able to create before. So we had a student last year who was in a wheelchair, and we decided to basically organize a whole studio around basically improving his wheelchair experience. And this is one of the projects that came out of that studio. One student came up with this idea to do this hand crank that is 3D printable and open source, so anybody around the world basically can download this file to fit exactly their wheelchair and put it on the two wheels, and that would allow them to drive the wheelchair by swinging the hand crank back and forth. So as opposed to basically kind of rolling the wheels, you can just do the cranks. This is usually a lot more efficient. So with the same energy that someone is using, you can go much further distance because the cranks are a lot more efficient. So this is kind of one of the earlier prototypes that are made. You can see all of it is 3D printed, but they had to use some bike parts. So the challenge next was to kind of do it completely from 3D printed pieces. And this is kind of the toolkit that they came up with. So obviously we still need to have some hardware, but it's like probably $5, and you add to that the 3D printing, in which probably you have to pay around $20, and you get a hand crank for $30. So if you put them together, $60 for both sides. And compare that to what exists in the market, which is in the range of $5,000 to $10,000. So this is kind of for our students to recognize this opportunity, and then on the other hand, be able to make it into a working prototype has been amazing. And these are the same group of students who ended up going to the White House last year, basically, and demoing this with the president. And this is the final version of it. It's something that the students are still working on, and different people in different kind of continents at this point are starting to kind of download this file, improve on it, and make it a lot more usable, which has been really the goal from the beginning, how to kind of create a movement around this where people can take this design, edit it, and make it better. This is another project that is close to my heart because I am the one who kind of asked the students to do it. So I wanted the students to reimagine the falafel experience. So I was kind of the chef in that studio. I wanted, but I always had these ideas that, can you make falafel in a different way? And I think initially the goal for it was to kind of focus on the experience of selling this as opposed to making the falafel, but then it evolved into actually making it. So we came up with this idea to do the falafel as a donut shape, and you can put all of your stuff on it. So it's basically one piece of falafel, so it's easier to make, and that way when you put all the ingredients on it, it's more robust as a sandwich, and the whole ingredients will be equally distributed on it. So when we came up with this idea, we asked the students to design a falafel cart that would reflect that we can take outside and use to sell falafel. And one of the first tasks that the students had to do was to design a mold. So this is again where 3D printing becomes really key. So every day we will 3D print a few different variations, and then we will go home and test them. And this is the final successful case. And these are all the variations that went into building the actual cart. And this is just it goes to show how much we kind of push the students in terms of iteration. And this is what the students produced basically in one day. And we decided on this circular one because it really reflects the donut shape of the falafel. So the way this works is that we inverted this whole notion of a wheel and a cart, so that the big ring is the actual wheel, and the cart in the middle is the thing that basically stays stable as this rolls. And this is a full-scale model of it. And this is every month now we have these falafel days where we actually take the falafel cart outside when the weather is good, and then we make falafel for all the students in the school. So that the image on the top left is really the iconic one for us, is like how we can drag it on the street. This is the other project that we did for the studio that I mentioned earlier, which is the studio for the Cerebral Palsy kids in Mexico. And I'm just gonna probably talk about the chair in the middle. This is one of the things that the people there asked us to do, was this wheelchair that would be easy to kind of take up and down without like using electric motors. The reason for that is that a lot of people who have a lot of kids who have cerebral palsy that are older and they cannot easily move, they wanted basically this chair to be narrow enough and to be able to go up and down, so they can use it to go to the restroom, they can use it to go to the shower, and it will be easy, for instance, to put the kids on bed and all of that. So the students came up with this pulley system, so you can see on the right here, and it has basically 8 pulley system that would reduce the weight by 8 times. And it has also a crank that will also contribute around like 20% reduction in the weight. So that way any person can basically lift the kids up and down without electrical motors. And this is our students basically in Mexico kind of testing out a lot of these products. So this is just to know if this is the end of the presentation. Just to talk about my experience with growing the business. I think the initial plan was to grow the business the way it is. It's kind of structured in Cambridge. So we create what we call a magnet innovation school, and that will attract students from different schools, private, public, and charter. And the whole idea was, we can get this robust enough in the first 2 years, and then we can take it into other cities. That failed a little bit. Well, not a little bit, probably miserably, because we still have the only place here in Cambridge. A big reason for that is that we are really too much on the extreme, and a lot of schools basically did not know what to do with us exactly, because we really did not fit with the system. So around 2 years ago, we started pivoting into a different model that has been a lot more successful. And a lot of it was inspired by the platform. When we started seeing the demand for it really kind of get a lot larger, we decided basically to focus on more of an outward-facing role. So the goal now is basically to help other schools do what we are doing. So we still have our school here as a test kitchen, but the goal is basically just to focus on helping other schools do what we are doing by providing a lot of training for their teachers, by also helping them kind of use the website and developing a lot of curriculum with them. And this is kind of what we offer. So at the core of it is really the platform, and we do the curriculum. We also send a lot of experts, and we do a lot of training for their teachers. And this is one of the examples now that we are working on. It's a school in Florida. And what we are trying to do with them is basically have a 3 to 5 year plan in which we're going to switch half of their curriculum into a studio-based curriculum. So rather than teaching everything in a traditional way, half the class will be done in a studio environment exactly similar to us, and we're going to leave the other half to be traditional. And that is really what we are trying to do with a lot of schools now that we work with, is that how can we take a lot of the lessons, a lot of the tools, a lot of products that we developed here, and basically embed them in the schools that we are working with. And the hope is that we can basically transition those schools into something that is more innovative and that's more creative. And that's the last slide. Are there questions in there?
Great, thank you, Saeed. We're opening the Hangouts for live questions. If anyone wants to ask questions, please log into the link that I sent you for the viewing parties, and you can ask through Q&A.
I have to click on Q&A.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone logged in yet.
It shows that it's disabled here. So I don't know if that's, I just clicked on it.
Oh. Okay, let's give them 2 minutes, or let's see.
So would they be able to log in? Because I see that it's disabled, so I don't know if anybody will be able to kind of log in.
Oh, you mean the Q&A?
The Q&A, it says this feature is disabled on my screen.
Oh, let me check. Okay, I have a question for you.
Okay.
It was sent by Katrina Balut from MIT Lab. In this environment here, how would you innovate this webinar style?
I think it will be good if I can see some faces. I think this is gonna. So this is the first time for me to do this, and it's a little bit disorienting not to see people. It's usually disorienting if I'm in an environment and then even with a lot of people, and then you don't see any response on these faces. So imagine if you are not doing it, if you are doing it without seeing anyone. So it's a little bit interesting. So I don't know, something that will give you some feedback on how you're doing would be amazing.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if anyone is logging in to ask questions, but I received a question through Hangouts right now, separately.
So I'm seeing, okay.
Were you able to see the question?
So I'm just seeing the same question that was before, and on the group chat, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the same question you just asked me. I don't see in the other one a new one.
Oh, okay. Okay. So if no one is logging in right now, if anyone has questions, I'll be able to communicate it with you, Said.
Yeah, that would be great.
Thank you so much. This was amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. And
If anybody is in the Cambridge area and they want to see it, feel free to kind of just contact me, and then we'll be happy to kind of arrange a tour. We have a lot of visitors coming every day, so it would be great to have some people who are listening to this to come and visit.
Great. I have another question.
Okay.
That was sent.
How are you implementing the projects at a larger scale? So the question is, how are you implementing the projects at a large scale? I don't know if the question is really around the students' projects or around Nuvo in general. I would assume that it's probably about the students' projects. Is that, the way we do it is that at the end of every 3 months, we kind of look at the projects that our students are doing, and we kind of decide on which ones we're going to push further, and we end up kind of dedicating a lot of resources to that. So the falafel thing that I was showing now, we are starting to produce that for a few people and optimizing that kind of model a little bit. So we decided that there is a value to kind of pushing this. Another project was around kind of sleeping devices, and we've been kind of working on that for a whole kind of year with some of the students. So yeah, the interesting thing about this is that at the end of every 3 months for us, we produce probably around 50 projects. And usually, there's at least 5 of these projects that can have a lot of value, more either as an open source thing or more as an kind of offshoot company. And we are working with a lot of our students basically now on really taking a lot of these things to market, or basically if it's open source, then how to create a whole movement around that.
Great. I don't know if there are any other questions, but I think we can end this webinar over here.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Said.
Thank you, and
yeah,
thank you everyone for listening.
Yeah, and for some reason we can't see the sponsors logo on this webinar, but this webinar was sponsored by Little Thinking Minds. We'll send out details right after the webinar, but thank you so much, Said.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.